Hey everyone, welcome to Healthy Mind, Happy Life podcast. I am your host, Caitlin Engler. I believe that we can all move through life transitions without losing who we are, but it takes the right support, community, and connection to carry us through. We can heal through sharing experience, strength, and hope. Each week, we will have genuine and real conversations that will inspire you to shift your mindset to live a happier, free life. Hey everyone, so I am hosting a Flow into Fall workshop on Friday, September 29th, if you're local, from 7 to 8:30. And I just felt called to host this workshop as we flow into a new season. And this workshop's going to consist of a few different mini flow sequences. It's going to help everyone explore individuality, their own creativity, and self-expression. And there's going to be a fun little surprise at the end. There's going to be a limit of 8 women in this class. The reason for that is to keep it small, quaint, and special. I find there's a lot of magic in smaller groups. So much time in our minds that this workshop is going to allow us to get into our bodies and just connect with that so we can build more than just muscle. If that's not something that you feel ready for, that's okay, because I'm doing a pop-up class before the workshop for an hour. It's an intro to pole beginner class. If it's something that you're interested in trying, again, if you're local and it's something you've thought about and want to do something different or looking for a new hobby, then come join me. It's going to offer different foundations to pole and just learn new ways and techniques to build confidence using a different apparatus for your movement practices. You can find the links below to sign up. Please sign up before all the spots fill up. There's only 6 sessions or 6 slots in the pop-up class and 8 for the workshop. I look forward to seeing all of you, and I hope that you join me. Hey everyone, this week I am joined by Elizabeth Andreyevskiy. She is a stress coach for Christian moms. She is the host of the Emotionally Healthy Legacy podcast, and she's a mama of 4. Elizabeth is super passionate about mental health and emotional wellness in motherhood. She supports stressed Christian moms in overcoming anger and embracing emotional stability, empowering them to leave an emotionally healthy legacy in their children's lives. Today, she joins me to discuss mom rage, the topic most of us hate and don't really want to talk about, yet really need to hear. Elizabeth is fantastic. She offers really good education and information and practical tools to help mamas break free of this cycle that they're in and tackle this concept of mom rage, because I know as a mama myself, the guilt and the shame that it leaves with us can feel so unbearable. And at the end of the day, we ultimately know that this isn't right. It doesn't feel right in our bodies. It doesn't feel right to treat our kids this way. But Elizabeth adds really great content and an element of information that is probably new information and in things that you haven't heard of before. I hope that this episode brings you everything that you are looking for so you can feel like you are a more connected and calm parent. Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for joining me today on this episode. I can't wait to talk about our topic of mom rage and mom anger. It's something I've really wanted to touch on for a while that I haven't been able to circle around to. And you just seemed like the perfect person to bring on to present this topic to my audience. So why don't we just start a little bit with who are you and what is it that you do?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate this opportunity. So, I'm Elizabeth. I am a mom of 4 kids. My husband and I have been married for 14 years. We live in Florida, And I have a podcast called Emotionally Healthy Legacy, and I help Christian moms who are struggling with mom rage and out of control, destructive anger, teaching them tools and skills how to support themselves proactively, and also tools and skills in the heat of the moment when they do feel triggered and super frustrated, so they don't say and do hurtful things to their kids. And I got on this journey because of my own experience. I was struggling in parenting. I ended up going to counseling. I was introduced to connective, respectful parenting approach, which was so different from what I was raised in. I was raised in the traditional home with, you do what I say, you don't question it. Even though I had good relationship with my mom, she had an emotional connection with me, but in general, there wasn't too much questioning. You just kind of did what you were told. And anger was an emotion that was uncomfortable in our family. I wouldn't say that it wasn't allowed. It's just like, well, it's fine. Just go to your room and like suppress it. And like, my mom would sometimes check in with us in the evenings and like, hey, how's it going? But my dad was very uncomfortable around anger. He's the flea. He'll just like, oh, this is too much. I'm just going to walk away, you know? And so as I was learning more about connected parenting and emotional regulation and having a connection with your children, if you want them to, feel safe around you and teaching them how to manage their emotions, I started to realize that I can't teach them what I don't know what to do. I had to start implementing all the things that I'm learning, like that I was learning about emotional regulation. And it was hard. It is not easy to learn a new way of doing things and to rewire your brain and handle things in a different, positive way than you have been for years. I felt like I was reacting a lot in parenting. I was threatening a lot. I was raising my voice a lot. I would get, have episodes of rage. It wasn't like a everyday thing for me, but I would have episodes where I felt out of control and I would say and do hurtful things to my kids. And obviously so much shame and guilt that came over that. And being raised up in a Christian community, it's like people say like, oh, there's this verse, be angry and do not sin, but nobody teaches you how. Like I go home, I'm so angry, I feel pissed off. Like, how do I not do hurtful things? And so I was learning great strategies in counseling and therapy. I just could not implement them when I went home. I would feel triggered. I would go back to my old ways of doing things until I ended up buying a course from an influencer called Unburdened. And in that course, it taught about prioritizing my needs and creating a day that supports me and creating healthy habits that are good for my emotional and mental well-being. And after I started implementing those things proactively on a regular basis, I started to notice a difference in how I was showing up as a mom. So I wasn't waiting for me to run on empty before, like, or to take time for myself. I was constantly refilling my cup on a regular basis in a good morning routine. And so that really increased my window of tolerance. That helped me to have more space, mental space to implement the strategies because I wasn't feeling as triggered as often. And so I thought, okay, I learned this awesome thing that nobody talks about. I have to share it with everybody. And that's how my podcast was born, Emotionally Healthy Legacy.
I love that. And I'm wondering, like, why, like, what are, and you can talk about some of your own experiences if you feel comfortable doing that. Like, what are some of those blocks that interfere when moms like know these things, right? We know we don't want to yell at our kids. We know that it's harmful. We can see it. We know that there's long-term effects from it. We don't want to be doing it because it feels awful. Yet we find ourselves getting into it, when a situation arises or we're overstimulated. And so what are some of the blocks that get in the way of this knowing that we have and the doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I've learned, it's how much stress your brain is under. So if you are under a lot of stress and then you add a messy home, running late, a kids that's not cooperating, your phone dinging, you are hungry and tired and sleep deprived, like that's a recipe for the disaster. Anybody's going to blow up in that moment, right? Because I know, I'm sure you know this about our brains. We have our frontal lobe, our thinking part of the brain, where we make good logical choices. That's where we can emotionally regulate, and we're able to problem solve and respond maturely. And then we have our feeling brain, where we are just, that's when we're getting dysregulated. We're being a little bit snappy, rude. We're raising our voice a little bit. We're not in rage yet, but we're like, you're feeling it. It's coming out in your attitude. It's a little bit disrespect. You're starting to see only your perspective. You don't really want to listen to the other person. You're starting to raise your voice a bit. You're not at a point where you're being like nasty and mean yet, but you're getting there. And then with enough stress on your brain, and let's say unmet needs, and enough of like that overwhelm and anxiety and stress, if it builds up enough, you get to the fight, flight, or freeze. You either just shut down and you're like, I can't, this is so much, I can't deal with it. And you just like freeze, or you flee. You're like, you know what? Everybody do whatever you want. I'm not even dealing with anything. That's my daddy. That's what his coping way of doing things. He's like, this is too much. It's too uncomfortable. I'm just gonna walk away. You guys do whatever you want. Or you get into that rage fight mode and you scream and yell, and you even maybe physically hurt your kids because you feel so out of control, because the stress has built up so much in your brain that, like, you get to that survival part of the brain, your thinking brain is completely offline. You can't even access it in that moment, and you're just doing reactionary things. Oftentimes it's like the way we were modeled. Some of it is just our automatic ways of doing. And like, you have to stop yourself before you get to that point. Otherwise, when you get to that point, it literally feels like you know what you're doing in that moment is wrong, but it's like you can't stop yourself. It's like because you feel so out of control. And so with my method, what I teach moms and how I coach them is I teach them how to increase your window of tolerance, how to set yourself up to support yourself proactively, control the stressors that you can control. You can't control if your child is melting down, but what you can control is like, if you had a good solid morning routine that increased your window of tolerance, if you meditate or if you journal and process your own emotions, in a healthy way, and instead of suppressing them, like, you can't control that your child is melting down, but what you can control is what you think about it, right? If you're thinking he's doing this to make my day miserable, of course he's doing this to me, versus I have a good kid who's just having a hard time, and my job is to be an emotionally stable and calm patient mom right now. Like, you're going to respond differently, right? And so in my method, I teach you things that you can control, what are in your control that you can actually do something about to support yourself. So then when that time comes, you can handle a lot more without going over the top. What are
I
your
bring
thoughts?
up a really good point that a lot of moms, we take our child's behavior very personally. So in the home and then outside the home, I think that we have a little more self-control outside the home when we're in public. But I think a lot of moms can relate to this pressure that we feel when our child's acting up in environments, and people have something to say about it. A family member, just someone walking by in the grocery store, make a comment, and it's not to be harmful. But I think a lot of moms then get anxiety about it and then take it personally, like, oh, it's a reflection of what I'm not doing or what I am doing. And then that builds. And then it also comes out at home. And I know from personal experience, when I first kind of connected with this term mom rage, I didn't even really know what it was for a long time, or that I was even doing it, until my child, well, I have three now, but like my oldest, as he kept getting older, kept showing me more about it. And that's how I
Hmm.
look at it now, is like, he really has been the one to shed light on this for me. But it was very confusing because I perceived myself being one way, and I was one way before kids, like this kind of not really calm. I wouldn't say I was a calm person, but more like easygoing, kind of go with
Yeah.
the flow, not very like rageful. I wouldn't describe
Mm-hmm.
myself that way. But now I have these little ones that are pulling me out of the ways I'm used to doing things. And so I'm trying to do those things and manage little people. And
Yeah.
so it just kind of took me by surprise, and it was like very confusing. And then like what you were describing, that shame and the guilt that comes with it. And I swear it's taken my therapist like almost a year saying the things you just said, like drilling it into me of you can't take this. She said it differently than this, but the way I perceived it is you're taking it personally, right? It's not personal. And then the other part of it, the regulating, right? Like you literally, I'm like, I know all these things. I know all these things. I am a therapist. I should be doing these things. And she's like, but you like literally can't do it. Right. In the
Mm-hmm.
moment, you can't. I'm like, what do you mean? Yes, I can. And I would argue with her about it,
Mm-hmm.
but I have a different understanding of that now. But I think a lot of moms, and I'd like to hear your perspective on this. We put so much pressure on ourselves, not just in our daily responsibilities, but internally. We put so much pressure on ourselves, like, well, I should be able to handle this meltdown
Mm-hmm.
and still do, the dishes and get them where they need to be and take care of myself and X, Y, and Z and so on and so forth. And we put so much pressure on ourselves to just do it all.
Yeah, for sure. And that's part of the reason that actually leads to a lot of overwhelm and even rage. And like you were saying, like, oh, I didn't really have issues with like having rage before kids. I didn't either. I was a really patient person. And then I had kids. And then you really quickly realize you're not as patient as you
Right.
thought you were. And like my first episode with rage was when my oldest was 3 and my youngest was a newborn, and he was colic, and he finally, after hours of crying, calmed down. I put him in the swing, and my oldest came up to him and he picked up his hand and he bit his finger. Who knows why that was? And I freaked out. I screamed at him like, "What did you do?" And I physically hit him. I hurt him out of rage, and like it just like flew out of me. And right away, so much remorse and guilt. Like, how could I have ever done this? Like, I can't believe I just did that. Right. But there was like part of it was I had unmet needs, right? I was sleep deprived. I probably haven't eaten in a long time. My husband was at work. I wasn't like, didn't have someone to tag team at that time, you know. I was trying to do the things, you know, keep the house cleaned up, you know, at some point. And like, it was just like having so much on my plate and trying to do all these things and having unmet needs, and it just like spilled out of me. Now I know why it was, right? Back then I didn't, and I just felt like I'm the worst mom in the world. But you're so right. Just having so much on our plate and trying to do all the things, that is a big thing that contributes to you feeling overwhelmed. And when you're feeling overwhelmed, you're shifting from your thinking brain to your feeling brain. And then it doesn't take as much to tip you over the edge to get you to survival part of the brain is where the rage is. And so that's why, like, one of the things in my program that I teach moms about, we're like, we do an audit of your life. We're like, what are some things that you need to delegate? What are some things you just need to let go of? What are some things that you literally just need to shift your mindset and perspective so then you're less stressed out? If, let's say, you have a friend coming over and you have this perspective, my house has to be spotlessly clean and all the bathrooms need to be cleaned up and XYZ, you're stressing yourself out for your friend coming over for 15 minutes. Oh, what is she going to think about me? Right. And then you're freaking out at your kids and they have nothing to do with it. You're just thinking about that situation with your friend because you have the standard that you put in your head versus like, hey, is this even serving me? Like, does my house define who I am as a person? It doesn't, right? I know I'm doing my best. And so, like, shifting that perspective, there's just so much that goes into it, right? And like part of it is like you were saying, like we have so much like society input, right? Even you're talking about that in your recent podcast episode, like even from social media, we like if we are consume a lot, we see other people's homes being that way. Her like taking all her kids to all these sports activities, doing this and this and this, and we're like, well, why can't I do it? And you try to do all the things, you stretch yourself too thin, you get burned out, you're feeling overwhelmed, and you have unmet needs. You have no time to decompress. What happens? You freak out, you scream at your kids, you feel like the worst mom in the world, you're creating rupture and, and hurtful things in the relationship with your kids. And then you go to sleep and you just like hate yourself for doing that. And it's a cycle that gets repeated. And so what I do is help moms break that cycle. Be like, where do we start? Oftentimes moms are like, I don't even know where to start. Like, I know what I'm doing is messed up. It's hurting my relationships with my kids. It's affecting my relationship with my spouse. I hate the kind of person I am becoming. Like, I just don't know even where to start. And like, one of the biggest things you start out with is like, you kind of take a look at your life and you're like, what's not working? Like, we need to figure out where we're at before we figure out where we're going. Like, look at your life right now. What's not working? What's not serving? What do we need to let go? How can we
Wondering
support you?
if you notice this when people are going through that process, do they go through like a period of almost grieving where you have this moment where you realize you can't sustain and keep up with the things that you've been doing or that you want to do because you know it's no longer working, and it's really hard to let go of things. And it could be things that you enjoy. Like some women enjoy cleaning their house and they feel really good when their house is clean. I mean, I think a lot of us feel that way.
Mhm.
But when you start seeing your kids as interruptions and you're lashing out on them because you're in the pursuit of a clean home, or like you were saying, a friend coming over, or whatever narratives we're telling ourselves. I'm just wondering if you see women go through that, because I know I've experienced that myself, where I had to kind of grieve, okay, these things that I want to happen either aren't going to happen today, or even big picture, I need to table these for a few years. This isn't the right time.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, mom, because moms have to, one of the biggest things is recognizing that you have limits. And we want to be unlimited in a sense, be able to do it all, just recognizing like, I can't do it all.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can try, but what's the cost of that? Right? It's
I'm
your
one.
relationships, it's your health. So yeah, moms do grieve that because they can't have this super mom version of themselves that they wish they can, and they have to recognize that they have to pick and choose what's truly important to them.
How do you think societal pressure contributes to that pressure that we put on ourselves?
Oh, a lot, for sure, especially social media. Especially social media. Listen, mama, who's listening right now, if you're not ready to get off social media, like I get it. My advice would be just get off social media, period. I don't do social media. It's not on my phone. Like accounts are active, but I'm not on there because of how it's affecting my mental and emotional well-being. So that would be first recommendation. If not, unfollow all the accounts that are triggering those unpleasant feelings of feeling like I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, I'm falling behind. Look at that mom, she's able to do XYZ and I can't. She has a perfect home. Her kids are like perfect. Like I remember, especially if you're going through a hard season in your life, like a divorce or a miscarriage or something like that, like please do yourself a favor. Like it's triggering you to the point where it's bringing up, it's not like, oh, I can avoid it completely. You're not going to be able to avoid it completely, but like, don't put yourself into that position where you know it's going to trigger you. And then you're triggered internally. You're feeling anxious. You're feeling resentful. And then what happens? Your kid is having a meltdown and you're freaking out at him because you're internally struggling. I was going through a really hard season in my life at one point, and I got off social media for a whole year. Why? Because I could not see happy families on there. I couldn't see people going on vacations and having happy marriages and just like everything is so, my beautiful kids, they're doing XYZ. I just could not look at that. It would bring up so much pain and resentful like resentful feelings, like for my mental and emotional well-being, I had to get off social media so then I could be present with my kids and focus on my own well-being and my own healing, right? And so social media insanely affects you, the pressure that we put on ourselves, because it's like right there, right in front of us, like, and it's something that's in your control. You can actually do something about that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, just did an episode on, I've been talking about it more and more because I've actually my accounts are active, but I deleted them off my phone, my home
Me
screen,
too. Mm-hmm.
because I found myself just out of boredom. I would like pull something up and like scroll mindlessly. My kids are like talking to me and I'm just like, like just totally checked out. And it's gotten better, but I also still find that like sometimes I even still do it, and then afterwards I'm like, that was so rude. If someone did that to me, I would be like, what the heck?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, why? Like, that is not more important than my kids' needs, even if it's something silly that they're telling me, like, oh, look, I have this small little cut on my finger and it's really not that important, but it is to them, right? And so, like, that's one reason. And then the other reason is the way I saw it influencing my decision making. It was really leaving me in a place of any decision I was trying to make, like waffling. And I couldn't just settle on a decision. And then I would get very overwhelmed and frustrated. So I just decided, you know what, I need to take a break. Like sometimes I will just go on and kind of check out what's happening or do a small post or something. But I know that social media is fake, most of it. There are some like real people out there, but a lot of it is just fake and people putting an image out there. It's not reality. Reality is talking to the clients on my couch. Reality is what's going on in my household. Reality is walking outside and seeing what the earth is doing. And so, like, I just felt like it was pulling me out of touch with reality and me disconnecting from my family. And um and so that's one reason that I got off of it. And I guess I am wondering if this is if social media and like all the things that we're constantly being exposed to, is it contributing to more mom rage or the way moms perceive their kids and the relationships they have with their kids? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do think it contributes to mom rage. So like think of this scenario, like you're just scrolling on your phone, you're looking at a reel and you're trying to finish a video and your kid comes up and he's like, Mom, my brother did this. Can you please help me? Like, what is your instinct? Like you just, or if it's just something even minor, you're like, stop, get away, go figure it out yourself. Like, and then they just want you more and more. Your brain wants to finish the video, right? Because like that's how our brain is wired. It needs some sort of closure there. And we get frustrated that our child has a need, right? Or even the fact that the stimulation, overstimulation, so much stimulation and input in our brain, and our brain can only handle so much. So that leads us to, again, that emotional part of the brain. And then your kids have needs and something not going your way. And then you're running late, and all of that quickly pushes you over the edge to that survival part of the brain, which is fight, flight, or freeze. That's where the rage is. Okay. So, yeah, for sure. Like, I totally agree. Like, when I got off social media, first of all, you're like, oh my gosh, I have so much free time. Like, what the heck do I do with myself? I can actually read a book. Like, when I go to the bathroom instead of scrolling on my phone, right? You can get through
You
books
can
pretty
actually
quick that
tune
way.
in to what's happening
Yes.
around me.
Yes, you feel less anxious because you don't have all these like news and all these like input. Like you have less comparison with like you and other moms, right? And then you actually have more time for real relationships, or actually message or call a friend and see how they're doing while you're folding laundry versus like, like scrolling on your phone and watching reels and be like, oh, you just feel more in general more motivated. You don't, like, you're not in a funk as much. It does affect you massively because if you're mentally struggling, like if you're mentally not in a good place, if the comparison and just like feeling like you're behind in life and you're not achieving all this and XYZ, and like if you're mentally struggling, your mental state affects your emotional state. 100%. Because if you're mentally struggling, you're telling yourself, like, oh my gosh, look at that mom doing XYZ. I'm a terrible mom. That just makes you feel yucky. And that makes, like, when you're yucky, feeling icky inside, you're in that emotional part of the brain. It doesn't take much to shift you to survival part of the brain where the rage is. So 100% down, like 100%, it does affect you in a negative way.
Mm. Actually, I'm not sure if this question really fits in here, but something I wanted to circle back to is how come we value that? How come we value like what other people are doing, or we value that mom who does it all, like homeschools and runs two businesses and is still taking care of her household and has this like amazing husband? And why do we like value that kind of mom per se? Or how come we look at these things and we value and say like, oh, that's what I should be doing?
Oh, that's a tough question. I have to think on that.
I'm putting you on the spot
You
today.
are putting me on the spot. Like, I think part of it is like in our society, like that's considered like successful, maybe. Like, success is the more things you're doing and running at the same time and they're working, like, and that, like, or just society just puts a lot of, light on that. And they're like, oh, this is what success looks like. And so we think, like, oh, in order for me to be a good mom, a good wife, a good entrepreneur, or whatever, like, I have to do these things. And so you put that in your head, and that creates like this belief pattern that unless I'm doing all those things, I'm not good enough. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's just like over time, society just kind of created that. And yeah, and then we just, because we're surrounded by that. But if you're not on social media, you don't see it as much. And so it doesn't bother you as much. Like, at least that's what
Yeah,
I
like we
have
definitely
found.
don't value taking more off of our plates. We value putting more on our plates.
Yeah, because we just like we compare ourselves with other moms all the time. Well, look what she can do. Look what she can do. But you don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
I know.
You don't know. She might be doing quote unquote all these things, but behind the scenes, her marriage is falling apart. She has no time to connect with her husband intimately. She has no time to lay down with her kids in the evening at night in bed and check in with them. She has no time to support her child who is having a hard time and is melting down. She's just rushing, rushing, rushing and going, going, going. She has no time to decompress and relax. And even if she does find that time, she feels guilty because she feels the pressure of doing, doing, doing. And that keeps her in that flight or flight. And then she easily is dysregulated and freaking out on her kids and has mom guilt and shame in her. She has this picture, pretty picture of like the living room that looks perfect, but behind the scenes, everything is a disaster and a mess. Like, we've seen those reels, like Instagram versus reality, like, how you just shove stuff in the corner and it, like, but you take this one good picture and like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
kind of what it is. Like, nobody can do it all. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. And if you're trying to do it all, it comes at a cost because you have limits. It's costing your mental well being, emotional well being, physical well being, or your relationships. It's coming at a cost. And so, just like recognizing that and be like, you know what? I'm choosing to prioritize my mental, emotional well being and physical well being because those matter. And if I'm feeling good, I have the energy to connect with my kids. I'm choosing not to have my kids in 10 different sports because it's not serving our family. It's like everything you sign up for, you have to manage. And the more things you manage, the more you get overwhelmed and the more you're struggling mentally and emotionally. It's just a cycle, and people just don't talk about that.
Yeah, like we do those things like you were talking about, setting our kids up for sports or putting them in certain things and trying to like keep up with what everyone else is doing around us instead of checking in with ourselves and saying what's right for me, what's right for my child, what's right for our family. And so we're always like kind of trying to keep up instead of just being like what's good for us.
Mhm.
I actually, just a resource, I'm not going to go into it, but there was a podcast episode I actually listened to recently on a book that was written, and it's called The Unsustainability of American Motherhood. and
Mhm.
by Jessica Gross. And I just wanted to share that with the audience. And it's really interesting because she talks about how in America it is unsustainable, right? Like it's not possible to keep up with all of these things. And when we do all of these things, we're never, and what I've heard you say today is like we're not connecting with our kids, right? And it leads to reactivity, and then our kids learn the same way. They learn how to react that way that we're reacting. And at least I've seen that with like my own kids, like when I've had moments where I've been rageful and act out, or I say things and then I hear them talk to each other like that. And then it's like those moments where I'm like, oh, that sounds so bad, and it's also a good thing because my kids are teaching me so much. But I think, having people like you and having these kind of programs can be so helpful for moms to learn not just about taking care of themselves, but how to self-regulate. And it's not just breathing, like, oh, I got to breathe in this hard moment. It's about doing the work outside of those hard moments so it integrates into your household, in your relationship with your children. So, as we wrap up today, I'm just wondering if you have any advice for moms that are struggling with mom rage, regulation, guilt, shame, just around this whole topic of mom rage.
Yeah, I do. I have a wonderful resource that I put together. It's a free training and it is 5 steps to break free from mom rage shame. So if you feel super guilty at the end of the night, feeling like you're the worst mom in the world, like your kids are gonna hate you when they grow up, and like you just can't even look at yourself in the mirror because you're have so much shame and guilt for screaming and yelling and hurting your kids, this training is for you. And I will give you the link to put it in the show notes, but it's at emotionallyhealthylegacy.com/free dash training. And so I want to leave you with one quote that I really, really like. And it's nobody benefits when you're running on empty, and nobody suffers when you take care of yourself as a mom.
Mm,
So keep
I
that in
love
mind.
that.
Yes, I've heard it somewhere. It's not mine. I did not make it up, but it was
Yeah,
just like, it's so good. And it just stuck with me.
Yeah, I've heard that first part of it in various ways, but that second part of it, no one suffers. Like that I think moms really need to hear, because that's somehow we have like made that up in our minds that if we take care of ourselves or take a step back or don't do something and to take less off our plates, like somehow everyone's gonna like suffer because of that. But that's such a myth. Like that is not true at all. And I
Yeah,
really
yeah.
appreciate you coming on today, because I don't know about you, but I am not a big, I just don't like that word self-care. It's just not, I mean, it's important to do things to take care of ourselves, but what you're discussing today is on an internal level, how to take care of ourselves, not an external of, like getting out of the house for a little bit or going to the grocery store by yourself or getting your nails done. Those things are important too, but they don't help you regulate in the moment. They don't help you connect in the moment. And so
Mhm.
like what you're offering in your programs and this whole topic, it really, I hope moms can understand that it's about taking care of your internal world and stressors.
Yes, yes. And yeah, you're so right. Like there's self-care is some people get triggered when they hear that word, and there's a different types of self-care, and one of them is external, like a bubble bath and time for yourself, but there's internal self-care where you do that uncomfortable growth, right? You look at your life and reassess things, and you learn tools and the skills that will support you, and you practice them outside of the heated moment. You shift your mindset and perspective, and you invest in yourself. That's self-care, I would say, like investing into support in the areas that you need. So if you're a mom who really, really struggles with, mom rage and shame, and you're a Christian mom who just feels like you're really ready to do something about it, I would invite you to go to my website. You can book a clarity call with me and we can take the next step and I can support you because I have a step-by-step process that's going to get you out of this, dark hole.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you again for coming on today. You gave so many helpful, or you gave a lot of helpful information on how the brain operates, how our bodies operate. And I think that more moms just need to hear things like this because it's very validating that, we're not alone, that a lot of moms are suffering in silence alone at home, but that's just not the case. You're not alone. Like a lot of moms are experiencing this.
Yes, and the longer you stay in shame and guilt, the worse it's gonna get. So please go get some help. Even if it's not me, go find some support that you need.
Yes, and I will put all your information in the show notes below. So anyone that wants to work with Elizabeth, you can get in contact with her, go on her website, listen to her awesome podcast, sign up for a coaching program, and I will put that information below.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so much,
much.
Elizabeth.
Thank you.